Yeah, so I know Ryan already did this, but how many people, first-timers again? That's a lot of people. How many people are going to come next month as well?
Perfect.
Yeah, cool. There you go, Ryan. You're welcome.
Yeah, we want to start by saying thank you to quite a few people here. So thank you, Ryan, and the team behind Creative Mornings for not only inviting us to be here to talk to all of you today, but for putting something like this on in our community. So it means a lot to us to be here. Thank you to Tinker Coffee for beaning everybody up. So if you guys haven't heard that term, getting beaned up means drinking coffee. So thank you, Tinker Coffee. Thank you to the Central Library for hosting us here today. It's awesome that you guys are doing this. And most importantly, thank you to all of you here today. You could have been literally anywhere else. You could have been with your family, at work, at brunch, working out, but you decided to be here, so thank you so much. The theme today is community. Ryan kind of touched on that. And if you guys don't know who we are, or you've never heard our podcast, Drink Culture, there's going to be a bunch of dots that we need to connect Jared and I to a theme like community. So we want to start by giving a little bit of background about who we are, what we do, and how we got here on this stage today.
How many people have listened to an episode?
All right, I like that.
There you go. Cool. How many people have listened to more than 10 episodes? All right, so we got some loyalists out there. I dig it. One thing Fabian forgot, we want to thank our wives as well. So Caitlin, thank you, and Kristen, where are you at? Thank you. There's many nights and also mornings that we spend meeting with people. Fabian has a full-time job. I have a full-time job. Haley, who we'll talk about here in a little bit, has a full-time job. So we try to find time in the mornings before 8, time after 6 p.m. to really kind of bring this all together. So, thank you to the wives for putting up with us on that front. My name is Jared Byczko. I am from Maryville, Indiana. Any region rats up here? Yeah. We got a few region people. In all honesty, never thought I was going to find myself in Indianapolis. I used to play soccer, travel soccer. We'd come down to Indianapolis all the time. And I shouldn't say I hated the city, but we always had a grudge against the city because we typically lost to teams down here. Eventually played some college soccer and got a scholarship here at IUPUI, Kelly School of Business here at IUPUI. So I do have some roots here now in Indianapolis, and I call Indianapolis home and wouldn't call it any other way. After a couple years of playing college soccer, traveled around the country, worked for PlayStation 3 for a couple of years. After working for PlayStation 3, moved to the Virgin Islands for 6 months and did like this little reverse retirement type deal, which is pretty cool. If you haven't done that before, you should try that out. Then after that, Peter, my business partner at Naptown Fitness, and I have to do a shameless plug here. Full-time job, Naptown Fitness. Peter and I started CrossFit Naptown back in 2011, and I had to put that up there because you can see that word, the fourth word up there. What is that? Community, right? Some people might actually call it a cult, which,
same thing.
We're not
small difference.
We're not going to get that detail today with that, but it's really, really important to me. Using this word community today, and that kind of brings it all full circle. Within Naptown Fitness, we do have 2 locations, one at 922 North Capitol by the Stutz building. Sorry, shameless plugs right now. And then Naptown Fitness Monon right next to the Speakeasy. So some of you who frequent the Speakeasy probably seen that before. So we have 2 locations, bunch of different programs, being boot camp class called SWIFT, Sweat with Indy for Time. We have our CrossFit class. We have Practice Indy Yoga, so if you're interested in yoga, that's available as well. And then we also have a Naptown Kids class, Naptown Kids program, and Naptown Nutrition, which is super important to me, which we can go on a really long tangent on that, but we're not going to go there. So I'll kick it off to Fabian here.
Cool. I'm Fabian Rodriguez. 33. I know I look a lot younger. Seriously. I live in Zionsville. I've got a beautiful wife who's very supportive. We are parents to 2. Where are they? There they are. 2 awesome cats. That's Minnie Wheat and Waffles. You can follow them at The Real Waffle Kitty. And I get alerts on my phone, so if I don't start seeing it buzz, I know you guys aren't actually following them. So please go out there and do that. I currently work in sales and marketing for a technology company called Perk. And I'm obsessed with sparkling water, so we won't get into too much more about me.
You just got follows. I just saw it.
Perfect. So we'll dive into Yes, so that's me in a nutshell. And if you guys have heard the podcast, you know that there's a third voice on there as well. And that's Haley. Haley with 2 Y's. So stand up, Haley, please. We want to say thank you to her. She's been a huge addition to our team. And I'm going to let Jared talk a little bit more about Haley and how she came to be part of the podcast.
Yeah, so we'll get into a little bit more of this later about our steps that we say in order to get engaged, to learn. But what's super cool about Haley is she reached out to us on Instagram, kind of slid into the DMs there on Instagram. And one day, Fabian and I are like, who is this person? And so we reached back out, and she's like, hey, you guys are doing exactly what I want to do here in Indianapolis. And we're like, what do you mean? She's like, well, I wanted to start a podcast, and I wanted to talk to business leaders, entrepreneurs, thought leaders, artists, just different cool people in the city. But I just found out through my OR fellowship that you guys are already doing that. She's like, so how do I get involved? And I was like, I don't know. Fabian, how does this work? So she's like, let's grab some coffee. So we went to Cocheck Coffee. Shout out, anyone like Cocheck Coffee? Yeah. Awesome spot. And we sat down, we talked for, I don't know, half an hour. And she's one of the, sometimes you find those people who just get it. And she's 22, graduated from Butler, was on a swim team, and just everything she was talking about, it resonated with what Fabian and I were doing. And she's like, I just want to be a part of this. I don't know what that means. I was like, great, because we don't know what that means. But let's figure this out.
Still don't know what that means.
Yeah, so then, it's kind of like this dating thing, because then I was like, well, now you can meet Fabian. So then we brought her to meet Fabian. We sat down together. And that's when we were like, you know what? She's going to be a great asset and great help to this. So we brought her onto the team. And I mean, she's co-hosted quite a few episodes. She handles our newsletter. She handles a lot of our marketing. And we don't get paid doing this. So thank you again, Haley. We really appreciate everything from that standpoint.
Yeah, so what is drink culture, right? We're up here to talk about our podcast and what that is. And Jared's really good at telling this story, so I'm going to kind of let him take the reins on this one. But it all started with something, right?
Yeah, it was a text message. And it was a text message from Fabian saying, hey, let's start a podcast. And it was pretty...
Because who doesn't send that text message, right?
Yeah, pretty simple, right? So I responded and said, great, what are we going to talk about? So then we kind of had some conversations. We're like, okay, what do we know a lot about? At the time, I was on this really big bourbon kick. He's been a craft brew aficionado for a while, or at least he claims to be an aficionado. He can say big words when he sips on beer, so
effervescent.
Yeah, effervescent's his famous word.
Mouthfeel.
Yeah, mouthfeel.
Things like that.
It's a good one. So then we met at Naptown Fitness, actually, at Capital Location, our members lounge right there, and we just started talking. The first episode we did was an hour and 47 minutes long. I have no idea what we talked about. I still don't know. We did pretend as if we knew what we were talking about with bourbon and beer, but I think after about 4, 5, or 6 episodes, we realized we don't know anything about bourbon or beer, at least not as much as the experts do. So that's when we kind of took a hard pivot. I think Kyle is here. He's one of our non-existent, you'll never find that episode again, because we threw away the first 7. Let's just say that. But we kept recording, and then we made a really large pivot when we were like, well, let's kind of model this a little bit more on an interview style where we're actually learning about people. I'm sure everyone here listens to the podcast. Obviously, we hope you listen to ours. But when you listen to a podcast, our big goal is action and taking something away, being able to walk away and do something with that podcast, do something with that information. So it's really important for us to provide that. And you kind of build off that, how I built this type of theme from NPR, but making that super hyper local to what we have here in Indianapolis to ultimately grow our community. And it's a struggle that we have right now because we are hyper local, so the numbers aren't as big as a regular podcast. So that's something that we challenge you guys, help share that as we go through, help share the word of the podcast so we can get more and more people involved. There's 900,000 people in Indianapolis, roughly, and our average right now of downloads per episode is 462, which we're pumped about, but at the same time, there could be...
We don't really need to dive too deep into the numbers. Jared likes to get into the weeds. So we'll kind of transition. We got to keep this going, right? So where does that bring us to today, right? We made this huge pivot. We went from thinking that we knew about beer and bourbon, realizing that we know absolutely nothing, and that we wanted to talk to professionals, people that knew a lot more than we did. So as of today, we're 72 episodes deep, so that's a lot. We made this huge commitment, and it was mostly on me pushing on Jared and leaning in on him to say that we were going to make this commitment to put out one episode every single week. If we've learned anything, it's that consistency is key. And podcasts pop up like weeds, right? But you see them go away because people aren't consistent. So if you don't have a consistent following, you don't put out this content that people are waiting to hear from, a lot of times that dies off. So we wanted to be very specific in putting that out every single week. So we're 72 episodes in today, so that's a huge deal for us. But we felt that we wanted to transition into something deeper, and Jared touched on that with being this hyper-local version of How I Built This. That's a podcast that I'm very inspired by. I take things away. I'm very just motivated to do something after I listen to an episode. So with this transition was making sure that we were educating people and providing value, right? Anytime you give up your attention, hopefully you would get something in return. So we kind of did this thing where we were masking education as entertainment, and that's kind of where the drinking part comes in. And that's twofold, right? One, it's interesting to hear people talk about something other than that thing that they're there to talk about. So if you can talk about drinking, I think that that's always fun. But that also allows that guest to bring their walls down. And what you find is that about 30 minutes into this episode, somebody who's a little bit like stiff and not really giving you a lot to work with starts to loosen up, and you get into these really deep conversations and these connections. And this is what's been driving our podcast, is the passion to tell these stories. So really what that's morphed into, there's a couple things. I want to give a shout out to our friend Jake Keeneman for coining the term cool people doing cool shit. And that's what we're here to celebrate. And that's the whole purpose behind our podcast. So it evolved into this storytelling of these people doing cool things. And that drink culture name that was originally just going to be about drinking turned into this double entendre where you're drinking in the culture of the city, right? And we take that very seriously. But that's kind of where we are today. So we're going to continue to talk about community and transition from the podcast into the theme for today.
Yeah, so our big question is...
That was a lot.
What's that?
I said that was a lot.
Oh,
I
it
just
was
said a lot of words.
Yeah. So our big question to all you guys is, can you change a community? Can you as individuals, as one person, change community? Can you help make that or grow that? But before we answer that question, we've got to define the word community first.
Right, so what is community? If you look at any boring-ass dictionary, it's going to give you pretty much the same definition, and that's a group of people living in the same place or having a particular characteristic in common. This definition sucks, right? It's passive, and quite frankly, I just don't like it, so we're here to redefine what that means. I'll let you guess at what that says, right? I know there's no vowels in there. Why? Sometimes, I guess.
It's cool, it's hip. I mean... Don't worry, we changed our name to actually spell out drink culture now because we spend the first 3 minutes explaining what DR and KCLTR is, so we're no longer doing that, so this is kind of our last run with no vowels, maybe.
I don't know. We'll let you guys tell us. But, we're here to redefine that. So that says community for those of you that still don't get it. Everybody in this room has chosen the community that they want to be a part of. Right? So why not help make that community awesome? And our definition needs to have a few things. And as I read this, I feel like we completely ripped off the manifesto, but trust me, we didn't, Ryan. So empathy is very important in a community. You need to care about each other. I cannot put it any other way. You just need to care. Collaboration. You need to be willing to work together to make this place somewhere that we all want to be. And we need support. So when somebody does something, we need to celebrate it. We literally need to support the person that has chosen to do something in the place that we live to make it a better place. So with that framework, we're going to redefine what community means, and that is a group of like-minded individuals invested in the growth or development of a place or a common cause. So that's kind of the whole purpose of why we're here.
Yeah, and I wanted to chime in really quick on that community front because I kind of sat back the other day and started thinking to myself, like, what does community mean to me? And then I thought to myself, well, I'm going to sit here for 2 minutes. I'm going to write down every community I'm a part of. So using that definition, I ended up coming up with, I think, 13 different communities, as in family, friends, the gym, our Naptown fitness staff, our business mentorship group, the drink culture staff, drink culture guests, drink culture listeners, neighborhood and neighbors, IUPUI Alumni Association. So all these different things are communities, and within those communities, you then have sub-communities. You know, within your family, you have extended family, you have within your friends, you have close friends, you have college friends, you have high school friends. So I encourage you at one point to sit down and just write down what communities you're a part of. It really will be a little eye-opening, kind of see, and maybe see where some are lacking and where some are growing. So it's super important.
Yeah.
So what have we learned? So over this podcast, it's been very interesting to kind of have some takeaways. And that's one of the questions we get most often from people is like, well, what have you guys learned doing this? And one of the coolest things I always come back to is, I think it's episode 13 with Elise Lane from Scarlet Lane Brewing. How many people have had their beers before? A few of us? Awesome. A lot of us? Awesome. Cool. And this was very early on in the podcast. We still were kind of getting our, getting our feet
Beak
a little
sweat,
bit. Yeah,
if you will.
there you go. And she made a comment where she said, rather than asking people like, what do you do for a living? She right away said, what are you into? And that has resonated with me since day one, because I think all too often we go to networking events, we meet new people, and right away the first thing we always say is like, hey, what do you do for a living? And now it's kind of like, well, let me go through this spiel and tell you what I do for a living, versus what are you into? And all of a sudden it opens up so many more doors. Now you can talk about your hobbies, you can talk about your kids, you could talk about sports, you could talk about different things outside of your career, and I think sometimes we get pigeonholed in that. And you can see a bunch of different people, a bunch of different guests here kind of coming through. How many people here are guests or have been on an episode? Go ahead and stand up really quick if you've been on an episode.
All right.
Yeah. Awesome. Now I forgot where I'm at. Oh, second part. The biggest thing, I think he and I both talked about the number one takeaway that we have from listening to 72 people at this point.
Just about.
Is helping educate the audience about what that person does. So educating the end user. And I think if you run a business, or you're a high level in business, or you work for a business, you probably understand the struggle of communicating your information to the end user. And so we want to serve as a platform to help people do that, to help people tell their stories. Because a lot of times you don't get the opportunity to tell your story. You're just trying to sell something really quick or sell a product really quick. So that's super, super important to us, and that's one of our biggest takeaways.
Yeah, and then we've got that good-looking guy. Some of you may recognize him down in the bottom. It's Ryan. One of the things that I've taken away personally, I know Jared feels the same way, is you guys may have heard of this brand called Nike, right? They did this thing where they say, just do it. So time and time again, we've heard the same message in so many different ways, and that's just that you just have to do it. So if you want to change something, or you want to do something innovative, or exciting, or thought-provoking, or cool, you just have to do it, right? Action. Action is the very first step. And ideas are cool, but you need action. So, if I've taken anything away, it's that. It's you have to do it. And we did it, right? We did something. And we just decided to do it. We weren't interviewers. We weren't podcasters. We certainly aren't and didn't think of ourselves as influencers. We were just two people that decided to do something that we thought was cool, and we wanted to share it with people. So we took that idea and we acted on it.
Yeah, so we are influencers, right? How many people hate that word? Yeah, my wife, she hates that. She raised her hand really high.
And fast.
But it's actually on my drink culture business card, because at the end of the day,
not surprised.
If you learn something, or if you take something away, or you get a new product you love, like, why wouldn't you share that with someone? Why wouldn't you spread the love? It's almost selfish if you don't share that. So I'm a really big fan of influencing, helping people find something new. And it's super important. And on the second part of that is the power of numbers. As influencers, as individuals who can go out there and talk to people, share things, it's all about, if I tell one person, that person tells two people, that person tells four people, all of a sudden more people. We talk about growing a community or changing a community. There's no better way to do it than helping each other, influencing each other. So to me, that's going to be super important.
Yeah,
whether you use this word or not,
And you
It's up
don't
to you.
need 200,000 followers to be an influencer. And what we mean when everybody is an influencer, that means whether you are followed by 10 people or 10,000 people, that circle around you puts value into the things that you have to say. So, when we say everybody's an influencer, you really are. So, if you take anything away, take some of that away. So, how do we make a change, right? It's good to say that we need change, but how do we make that happen? And we've got 3 ideas to take away here on how you can make some change.
Yeah, we're going to get through this quickly because we got to get people on stage here. Number 1, learn. So whether you are mowing the lawn, driving a car, or doing whatever you're doing, listen to a podcast. Listen to an Audible. Try to always be taking something away from whatever the situation is. Read a book if you need to. I personally cannot read. I can read, but
Jesus. Type of journal.
But I'd prefer to listen to something as I'm going. Follow people on Instagram, follow the people on Facebook, different people that are influencers to you or in your different hobby. Don't worry, I love when people laugh at me, so it's totally fine. The second thing is engage. Engage with people. Make sure you go out and seek professionals in the area you want to become better at. Ask someone a coffee. Go, have a conversation. Act interested with that person. It's not going to happen if you just sit there and don't do anything. I think Fabian nailed it earlier when he said the word, and I think it's in the manifesto as well. One of my favorite words is action. Because if you don't do anything, nothing's going to happen. It gets frustrating when people are like, well, I can't do this, can't do that. You can do it, you just have to do it. And I think the second biggest piece to engagement, and I think we, as a nation, as a world, do a terrible job of it. Can anyone guess?
Littering.
Littering, I hate littering. It starts with L, though. Listening, right? We do a terrible job. When we sit down with guests, we are engaged for that whole entire time. We both walk away just floored, just tired from listening the entire time. So challenge yourself to listen a little more. My wife probably doesn't think I do a good job of it, but with the podcast I do, so.
It's got to count for something. And the last one, and most importantly, you have to give a shit. Plain and simple, you have to give a shit. Community is a two-way street. You've got people that are doing things, and you have to have the people that care about the people that are doing things. I've heard people complain about there not being enough of this, or that we don't have that, and on and on and on. But if you're not going to offer to change something, or create something, or invest the time to figure out that we actually do have that thing, I don't know what to tell you, right? Like, maybe this talk isn't for you, but I can't stress that enough. You have to give a shit in order for a community to strive. So I talked about it earlier, but action, right? This is where the investment part about our definition of community comes into play, and action is absolutely indispensable, right? So to take action, you have to do a couple things here. So you must be a disciple for your community, and I know that's kind of a powerful word, so let me break it down a little bit. A disciple is someone who accepts and insists in spreading the doctrines of another. And if we know that a doctrine is a set of ideas or beliefs that we are taught or believed to be true, then our doctrine, to drink deep of the culture that surrounds us, is something that we can all do to help a community. So these 3 simple things, learn, engage, and give a shit, is something that you can take away from here and start putting into action today. So, thank you.
Thank you, guys. Click on the last one.